Millions of people will pay the cartel takeover, the Lisbon Treaty, with their lives. Millions. You may think this is impossible. Well, think again. These very same interest groups, as we heard, are responsible for the death of more than 100 million people in 2 world wars. Without them, these wars would never have taken place. And now they are responsible for 17 million heart attacks that continue every year if this knowledge is not being used in the hospitals and medical practices, and 8 million people who die from cancer unnecessarily. They've done it before, ignored the interests of millions of people, sacrificed their lives, and they're doing it again. And as for the Grand Plan East, or the Generalplan Ost, well, look what's happening in Greece. Look what's happening in Spain, in Portugal. Look what's happening in other countries that have not made the news yet. It's just the beginning. So here is the master plan, the cartel's strategy to force Greece, Ireland, Spain, and the rest of Europe into bankruptcy. Well, why would they do that? Well, first of all, let's look at how they do it. They promote diseases behind the mask of providing health care. They do exactly the opposite from what their goal is. How can you cure cancer with chemotherapy when half of the chemotherapy substances are known to cause new cancer? And if you deceive entire nations with respect to the healthcare system, you are draining them economically. You're killing the people, but you also drain them economically. Entire nations. Because you force them to pay billions for imports of patented drugs. And that money, that's what causes the bankruptcy of entire nations. Not because the people in Greece, Ireland, or for that matter other European countries are lazy. It's the systematic drainage of essential funds. So now we come to the real purpose of this plan. The real purpose is the political takeover of entire continents. So by maintaining this crisis, by constantly draining this money, they actually cause the crisis. So when the crisis comes, Mr. Sarkozy can stand up there and can say, we need a transnational government for all Europe. And the same is also true for the oil business. So there are alternative energies available right now, but they're not being used. Why? Because they're being blocked in order that this scheme works in this area too, draining the national resources and make the people of Poland, and for that matter all of Europe, dependent on oil. Same purpose, same effect, bankruptcy of just about any country if that continues. And then, in order to hide that scheme, the political stakeholders of the cartel, namely Sarkozy and Merkel, embark on what I call psychological warfare against the people of Europe. Deception. They call it exactly the opposite. Defamation of people like us, of the pioneers, who say this is what's happening. And distraction, like wars in Libya and other areas. The purpose of all of that, confusion. You should not know what's left and right. It's such a crazy world. Let's just hand over all responsibility to those guys up there. That's what they want. Then they launch fear campaigns. Do you remember the influenza epidemics, on the pig flu. There was nothing about it. And the goal of all of that is to cause an increasing dependency of the people of Europe and ultimately to make them accept even a dictatorial regime. You are reminded when you look at that at George Orwell's 1948, 1984. Those who read it remember the newspeak, the new language that is being created in this dictatorship. They say democracy and they mean dictatorship. They say freedom and they mean dependency. They say prosperity and they mean poverty. And they say peace and they make war. And the latest strategy of the cartel is to hide behind social movements, movements of democracy, online and offline. Wikipedia. If you want to know the background of Wikipedia, look at wiki-rath.org, where Paul and others researched the background of this medium. But you can easily find out who is behind these initiatives. Because in those initiatives, in those movements, you can criticize everything except the pharmaceutical business with disease and the petrochemical dependency of the energy sector. So that, for me, is one of the compelling reasons why there has to be a movement that does exactly that, addressing those two legs on which the forces of evil depend economically. And if you look for a definition of the movement of life that we invite you to join, that's it. The time has come, historically, for a global movement that defines as its goal to end these dependencies from pharmaceutical drugs and from petrochemical energy supplies. Chapter 7. The opportunity and responsibility of the movement of life now. I was privileged as a scientist to make contributions like that. The possibility for the first time in history to reverse the plaques in the coronary arteries that lead to heart attacks. It's documented in my book, Why Animals Don't Get Heart Attacks. I was privileged to contribute in the area of cancer, the possibility for the natural blocking of cancer cells. And yes, I thought everyone will embrace this information because so many lives could be saved. Based on these discoveries, 3 out of 4 lives in Warsaw, in Poland, in Europe, in the Western world could be saved. 3 out of 4. But what has been the reaction of the cartel? Over the last 10 years, they filed more than 100 lawsuits against me, against our research. Why? To block this information. So when I'm standing here and talking so clearly about these interests, that's no coincidence. After 10 years of that, you know your opponents.